afternoon and welcome to Wellness Wednesday. Today's Lunch and Learn is all about how toxins are blocking your optimal health. So let's get started. Thanks so much for stopping by and enjoying lunch with us today. So in the University of Code Crackers, there are 7 keys to optimal health. And today we're going to dive a little bit into key number 1, which is toxins. So toxins are indeed blocking your optimal health. Before we really get into that, let's take a step back and define what is optimal health. So in my world and on the scale that I use, optimal health is you living your most optimal and vibrant life possible at your physical best, your mental top of game, without any health challenges. So optimal health may look different for you than it does your neighbor. So we're defining what your optimal health is. Now, in order to do that, we first want you to identify where are you today on that optimal health journey. So the scale that we're going to use is defined from a -10 to a 0 to a +10 and all of the numbers in between. So -10 is going to be your near death. Now, I doubt that anybody on this call with us today is there. Some days you might feel like it, and you might be close to it, but I don't think you're really at a -10. Now, 0 is what we're going to call our comfort zone. So oftentimes when I ask people, hey, how are you doing? How are you feeling? How's your health? The answer that I get back is, I'm okay. So okay in my world means comfort zone. You don't really have a lot of diagnosis. You don't really have a lot of daily health challenges that you're battling. You're getting a fair amount of sleep. You're having a fair amount of energy. You're just okay. It's not what I would consider optimal health, which is on the +10 side of that scale. So my question to you today is, where are you? So take a minute and think about, if you were to rate yourself today, where would that be? -10 to 0 or through +10? Now my next question, good job for putting that down. My next question for you is, where do you want to be? So many of us, if we're in a -8 zone, we are going to be thrilled for our optimal health to be at a 0 or 1 or 2. That's perfectly fine. You, on the other hand, might be somewhere in the 0, -1, +1 range, and you really want to get to that +10 optimal living and optimal health. This is your health journey, not mine. So you define where you are today, and you define where do you want to be. So go ahead and put that down. Think about those 2 numbers. So today's topic, now that we are all on the same page of what is optimal health, so today's topic is Mr. Inflamm-A-Man. So with every good superhero, we need a villain. And today the villain that we're going to start talking about is Inflamm-A-Man. Now, Inflamm-A-Man is standing between where you are today, and he is blocking your ability to get to where you want to be. Now, Mr. Inflamm-A-Man is full of toxins, and he is spreading nonsense and wreaking havoc on your body. Now, let's all also get on the same page of identifying what are toxins. Because again, when we're using language, we want to be on the same page and the same definition of that language. So let's talk about what are toxins. So in general, easy rule of thumb is a toxin is a foreign invader. A foreign invader into your life, your body, your systems, your organs, and your cells. Now, those foreign invaders might be in the look of chemicals. They might be in the form of toxic metals. They might have the genetics of biotoxins. They could be emotional stressors. And you might also be dealing with some foreign invaders that normally are good things, but they have ended up in places where they shouldn't be. Now, we're not really going to get into a lot of emotional stressors or the good things today, but just to give you an example, I think everybody is pretty familiar with stressors. So that is what we normally say, I'm stressed, or if we find that our shoulders are pulling up or our anger levels are increasing, or the woes of the day, the financial struggles of meeting ends meet, making ends meet. Maybe it's health challenge as a whole. Maybe it's family issues. Whatever it is, those are emotional stressors. And I think most of us are familiar with what those are. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on that today. We're also not going to spend a lot of time delving into what are good things. We're going to save that for another Lunch and Learn. But just so you understand what I'm talking about and to look forward to a future Lunch and Learn, these good things are typically going to be food related. So they are going to be dairy, whey, casein, soy, gluten, things that we eat. Maybe it's specific food intolerances or food allergies. And the reason that I'm going to categorize those as good is because the thing itself is not necessarily bad, but because that good thing has gotten into a place where it shouldn't be, is why we're going to consider it a toxin and a foreign invader. So when things leak out of our system, specifically our gut, into other parts of our body, it causes our immune system to kick in. Those are the good guys. Those are our superheroes. And reach out and find them as if they are foreign invaders. So the body doesn't know the difference between a chemical, heavy metals, toxic metals, emotional stressors, biotoxins. It just knows that something is here that's not supposed to be, and they have to kick into high gear. So again, we're not going to talk about the latter two of this list today, but I did just want to make sure that they were on the list as foreign invaders. So now let's get into the next piece of our puzzle. Whoops, my mouse got moved. So today we're going to be looking at toxins and your code. Now, if you joined me last week for our Lunch and Learn, we dug into what is your code. So I'm not going to do that today. You can go back and watch that other video, and I'll put a link below for that. But those toxins that we're going to talk about today, those foreign invaders, they are creating what I like to call typos in and on your instruction manual. And your instruction manual is your unique DNA code. And when we have typos, we have problems. We have problems with functionality. We have problems with processes. Now, toxins are impacting the environment of every single cell in our body. So let's look a little bit more in depth at what some of those toxins might be. So these toxins are viruses, bacteria, and fungus. I call those the living organisms because they have their own, they're alive in us. They are, some bacteria is good, not all. Fungus, viruses, they are living organisms and they are looking for a breeding ground. And when they exist inside and around your cells in your cellular environment, they wreak havoc. They are toxins. Another one, mold and Lyme. These are a more specific category of viruses, bacteria, fungus. These are living organisms also, and they are smart cookies. These guys, oh my goodness, I could probably do an entire workshop, lunch and learn, on just these biotoxins, and maybe I will. The next category or next type of toxin that we're going to look at today are chemicals. And we're going to look at a list of different kinds of chemicals, man-made ingredients, and where they might show up and what they do inside the cells. Another area, so again, this is another subset of chemicals. A specific type of chemicals are going to be pesticides and herbicides. What are they doing when they're circulating around in our body, and how'd they get there? So we're going to look at some of that today. And then these are going to be our toxic metals, and this is just a few of them. There's probably about, let's see, I think the toxic metal test that I do tests and looks for 24 different toxic metals that could be roaming around in your body, and some of them you think, where in the world did I get uranium from? But that's the scary thing, is these things get in our body and we don't even know that they're there, but they're causing problems. So lead, mercury, aluminum, those are kind of the big three that we usually deal with. Now, when we have those toxins inside and around the cells, let's look at what happens. So in pops Mr. Inflamm-A-Man again, and his primary job is to wreak havoc and to cause inflammation in the cellular membrane of all of your cells. Now, when that cellular inflammation happens on the membrane of all of your cells, we see inflammation. And if you're like me, you probably have heard all disease begins with inflammation, or all disease is connected to inflammation. Now, when I first started hearing that, before I really started my health coaching certification journey, I thought that inflammation was simply my elbow hurt or my knee was in pain. I thought it was that kind of inflammation. But I learned that that's not the kind of inflammation that we're talking about. The kind of inflammation that we're talking about is cellular level inflammation. It is past the joints. It is past the detoxing system. It's past the liver. It's past the gut. It is cellular level. And because our body is made up of trillions of cells, you can probably see that when one cell is inflamed, it's not that big of a deal. But if you have trillions of cells that are all inflamed, we got a big deal going on. So inflammation is Mr. Inflamm-A-Man's primary job. That's his goal. The next thing that we see happen is as those inflammation happens, it causes hormone imbalance. And again, we're not going to get into the depths of all of those hormones. We'll save that for another lunch and learn. But imbalance of all the different hormones that are in our bodies start to happen. And when imbalances happen, we get things out of kilter. The next thing that happens is functionality. So all of the functions that are instructions in our DNA code can't happen, or they're functioning suboptimally or poor. And when they're not functioning well, processes don't go well. It could also be that the receptors on all of our cells are blunted. So it's kind of like a lock and a key mechanism. And if the lock that's on, so that's the receptor, already has a key in it because of a false hormone, the key that's the real hormone can't get in it, or it's so inflamed that the lock can't be seen by the key. So that's the blunt receptors. Now, when these things are happening because Mr. Inflamm-A-Man has got his way inside your cells, we see health challenges pop up. We see dis-ease, and we see what eventually leads to a poor quality of life. None of which do I want to see for you. So we're going to take one more step inside your cells, and we're going to understand why that inflammation of the membrane matters. So if you can imagine, our cells are all pretty fluid. They allow certain things in and certain things out. And when that fluidity is going on, everything is working well and things are functioning well. But when there's inflammation in the cellular membrane, we see two things happen. When reactive oxygen species, which is oxidative stress, goes up and toxins go up, that increases the cellular inflammation, and there's three things that happen that go down. The superoxide dismutase decreases, the glutathione, which is our body's own antioxidant, very important, goes down, and the ATP, which is the energy, the powerhouse inside all those cells, also goes down. So you can see that if these antioxidants and energy are not functioning well, how do you feel when you've been going too long and you have lost your energy? Probably a little fatigued. So imagine all of your trillions of cells are feeling that way. Now, I'm going to give you some statistics, and we're going to talk about what's going on in population health and why is this cellular inflammation a problem. So we need a change. Statistics tell us that 1 in 3 children born after 2020, that's this year, will have diabetes at some point in their lifetime. 1 in 3, 33%. We also know that at the present rate, by the year 2032, 12 years from now, 1 out of every 2 children in the United States will be born and be on the autism spectrum. 50%. 75% of Americans currently over the age of 40 have at least one chronic disease diagnosis. 75% over the age of 40. That's not really great, folks. Statistically, 1 person will die of cancer every 54 seconds. So during our time today, that's roughly about 30 people. That's from the American Cancer Society's 2014 facts and figures. And dementia and Alzheimer's are now the fastest growing diseases in the United States. It is the #1 concern of people over the age of 60. And sadly, we are beginning to see symptoms of cognitive decline in people in their 40s. So, as I mentioned, every good superhero needs what? They need the villains to fight. Now, I and you are that superhero. And I'm going to tell you who our villains are. You know, if we were to watch Marvel Comics, we don't always know who the bad guy is. It's part of the storyline. I'm going to give you a heads up, and we're going to talk about some of these villains today. So these villains that we're going to talk about today are those toxic metal, mold, hidden infection, and chemicals. We're going to spend most of our time on metals, toxic metals, and chemicals today. But I want to introduce you to these villains so that you can be on the lookout, so that you can keep your, as I tell my son, spidey senses keen and aware and looking for these villains. Now, we're going to talk about 12 of them. I'm going to go through them pretty fast, but I want to talk about these 12 villains today. The first villain that we're going to talk about is BPA, bisphenol A. Now, this is a chemical that is used to make plasticized products. The reason that it is a bad guy, a villain, is because it looks like estrogen to our cells. So remember I mentioned a couple of minutes ago that on that cell are all of these receptors? Well, if those receptors already have a key in it, BPA is one of those keys that sometimes go into the lock of estrogen and prevent the real estrogen from getting into the lock, because your cells don't understand the difference. Chemically, they look the same to our cells, molecularly. BPA has been linked to cancer, reproductive problems, obesity, and heart disease. According to government tests, 93% of Americans have BPA in their bodies. Where do we find these things? So anything that has plastic, even the things that have a tag on them that say BPA free. They don't have BPA, but they have BP other things, BPC, BPX, that are equally, if not worse than, BPA. Canned foods, soda can linings, thermal receipts from the checkout line, anything that has plastic. Now, BPA specifically is a recycling label of number 7. The next thing is called dioxin. Dioxin is formed industrially with the combination of chlorine or bromine with carbon or oxygen. So it's some chemical compounds synthesized when we've got some stuff going on. So think about your manufacturing plants that are making different things. Now, dioxin is a chemical that disrupts male and female sex hormone signaling. It affects the immune and reproductive system. There are some industrial concerns about this, but it is really currently inundated in our food supply. One of the ways, or one of the places that we often see this is from animal products. And remember, you have to think about the process of getting animals. So that's one reason that we want to grass-fed, organic farming of even animal products. The next thing is atrazine. Atrazine is a herbicide. It has been linked to breast tumors, delayed puberty, prostate, inflammation, and cancer. Low levels, this is pretty interesting. Low levels of atrazine can turn a male frog into a female frog that actually can produce completely viable eggs. Kind of scary. Atrazine is seen often in non-organic food that contains corn. That's why I like to Choose organic corn if you can find it. It also can show up sometimes in our drinking water. Next, we're going to talk about phthalates. Phthalates is an ingredient that is used to make things plasticized, or a lot of times you see it in personal care products. It's that creamy feeling, the smooth feeling. If you look on your ingredient list for your personal care products, you will often see phthalates on there. Plastic food containers, children's toys, plastics made from PVC. This will have a recycling label of a number 3. So we've had 3 and 7 recycling. And we've already talked about personal care products. The next one is perchlorate. So perchlorate is a compound that's actually in rocket fuel and highway safety flares, fireworks, pyrotechnics. Its problem, what it does in our cells, is it competes with the nutrient iodine. Iodine is necessary for good thyroid health. Therefore, it disrupts the metabolism regulating hormones. We didn't talk phthalates. They can trigger death-inducing signaling in testicular cells, and phthalates have been linked to hormone changes. Obviously, it's connecting to that receptor. Obesity, thyroid irregularities, diabetes, and more. Next is PBDE. That's a really long name for fire retardants. And you could probably think, why in the world are we talking about fire retardants? Well, glad you asked. Fire retardants, I'm going to read you a study here. Gotta put my glasses on. In 1999, a Swedish scientist studying women's breast milk discovered something totally unexpected. The breast milk contained an endocrine-disrupting chemical found in fire retardants, and the levels have been doubling every 5 years since 1972. So fire retardants are everywhere. So if you have clothing that is fire retardant, children's clothing, think about that. If you have water resistant products, the stuff that they use as that fire retardant and that water resistant is a PDBE. So with kids, think about it. It's coming off of that material. It's going into their skin. It's getting into their body. It's getting into our bodies. Next, let's look at, turn my page here because I want to make sure I give you all this. Okay, now we're going to get into a couple of our toxic metals. Lead. Lead is a really key toxic metal, and when it's in our body, it harms nearly every organ in our body. And so you think, how would it get into me? It can get in through our water. It can get in through lead paint. It can get in through a bathtub that is an old bathtub, has lead. It could get in through a number of ways. The number one way that we get lead in our bodies is through mom during pregnancy. Because if mom has it in her body and her bones, she is going to release that, and it's going to get into her developing fetus. So this is a huge area. If you are thinking about getting pregnant, you're having difficulty getting pregnant, then let's run a heavy metal, toxic metal test on you to make sure that that's not the reason. And if you do have it, we can get it out in time before conception. Lead has been linked to brain damage, miscarriages, increased blood pressure, kidney damage, nervous system problems. It is disrupting your hormones. It is lowering sex hormone levels. Bad news, that lead is. Making sure. Mercury. Mercury is another toxic metal that we want to look at. It is the second most toxic substance on Earth, and it can interfere with fetal brain development. It directly interferes with menstrual cycle. We get it primarily, I guess it gets into the atmosphere primarily through burning coal. But most of us, if we have mercury in our system, in our body, we get it from those silver fillings in our mouth. We're not going to get into that really in depth. If you have questions about that, we can talk offline. But mercury is a bad, negative villain in your body. So we want to get it out. Arsenic. Arsenic is another toxic metal. And again, when I first started hearing about this, I thought, how in the world do we get arsenic? That's like a poison, right? So arsenic comes in through the soil and gets into our water sources. It can cause skin, bladder, and lung cancer. It interferes with hormone functions, energy, and stress. So I hope you can see there's a theme here. These villains are disrupting hormone systems, reproductive systems, cognitive functioning. These things are messing with us. We got to get them out of our body. The last three we're going to look at is organophosphates, which is a type of pesticide. And this pesticide, where is it? I want to read this to you. This is a neurotoxic organophosphate compounds that the Nazis produced in huge quantities for chemical warfare during World War II. And American scientists used the same chemistry to develop pesticides that target the nervous system of insects. Now, I don't know about you, but just logically, I'm thinking, if this is targeting the nervous system of insects, how is it not targeting my nervous system? I don't know, maybe so. Something to consider. It interferes with the way that testosterone communicates with your cells. So it's another hormone disrupting challenge, villain. And it alters our thyroid hormone levels. PCFs. PCFs are perfluorinated chemicals. Is that right? Perfluorinated chemicals, PCFs. These are non-stick cookwares. Anything that has that protection on it, the brand name is your Teflons and that kind of part of the world. Teflon is just a brand. PCFs is the chemical that we want to look for. And PFOAs, it is completely resistant to being able to biodegrade. So keep that in mind. Because what do you do with your non-stick cookware when it's all scraped off? Throw it in the garbage, goes in the landfill. It has been linked to kidney and thyroid diseases and high cholesterol. And the last guy that we're going to talk about today is glycol ethers, paint. The European Union says that it may damage fertility or the unborn child. Children exposed have an increased risk of asthma and allergies. So as you can see, these 12 villains that we've talked about today, again, it's only a few of them, they are part of the epigenetic factors. So we look at previous Lunch and Learn, we talked about the hard code, the actual DNA code, and we talked about epigenetics, the external lifestyle choices, environmental factors that are influencing your genetics. Toxins are a epigenetic factor. Unfortunately, they are a negative epigenetic factor. So I know that you might be thinking, holy cow, this is like doom and gloom. But fear not, because a good superhero never leaves their victim in a bad light, because I'm here today to offer you hope. But I do want you to know, before we go into that, that inflammation of the cell membrane, remember, disrupts cellular fluidity, the ability for good and bad stuff to move in and out of your cells, and the functions of those cells. And as long as your cells, membranes, are inflamed, your cells will never fully heal and repair. Chronic and mystery health challenges are likely to continue. Fear not, there is hope. And so let's look at 3 really quick steps of that hope. The first one is we remove the exposure. And we're going to talk about how to do that. The second thing is we've got to remove what's in your body. Got to get it out. And the third one is we have to rebuild and create a better, more pleasing cellular environment for all of your trillions of cells. So, step number 1, remove exposure. So I talk about this in the things that get into our body. That's the exposure. Now, some of these things we can control. Let me rephrase that. Some things in the exposure we can't control. Most of the things we can control with just a little bit of education, awareness, and choices. So this is the list. I'm not going to go through it in detail. I'm not going to read to you, but there are a couple of resources here. Basically, it's a matter of being aware of what is coming into your bubble. If you can imagine, you've got this bubble surrounding you, and what gets in your bubble is going to get into you, whether it's what you're putting in your mouth, whether it's what you're putting in your skin, whether it's what we're breathing, we're seeing, we're smelling, we're thinking. All of those things come into our bubble. So when we begin to pay attention to the things that we allow into our bubble, I was recently reading Michael Port's book, and he uses an analogy of a red velvet rope. Who do you allow past your red velvet rope? Well, I would offer you the same kind of analogy of what are you going to allow past your red velvet rope to get into your body. So there is some education on what it is. There is some choices on good, better, and best. And there are some tools that we can use to help remove that exposure. And I've built a whole entire university, an online university, around not only this, but the other 6 keys as well. So if you have questions about that, let me know. I'd love to introduce you to that university. But these are just some of the things that we can begin to do to remove and reduce the exposure, what gets into our bubble. Now, that's only a piece of the pie, right? We've still got stuff already in our bodies. So in order to then go to the next step, and those things tend to work in tandem, we have to remove the exposure and get rid of it in our bodies. Those kind of happen at the same time or in partnership. But we need to understand and discover our genetic code. We need to do some repair on our gut, likely, because 74% of Americans have gut issues. Improve our detox pathways, support your cells, and eat for cellular healing. And I'm getting ready to come out with a eating plan, a meal plan with a shopping list for cellular healing and to fight Inflamm-A-Man. So stay tuned for that. It's coming here in the next week. And ultimately, you could very well benefit from a deep cellular detox protocol to go in and seek out and destroy those foreign invaders. So this is the cavalry that's getting called in to help your body do what it may not be able to do on its own. And then the third step is rebuild your cellular environment. So once we've discovered your code, we can then use that code to begin living based on that code. We can continue to make lifestyle changes. Nothing overhaul, because that's not effective, but small steps, one little baby step at a time. Keep abreast of your blood markers, because they give us indicators of what's going on, and keep learning and keep improving. With that, final 2 reminders here. Optimal health begins with your code. So you have to know yours. That's your genetic instruction manual. And then recognize and accept that your optimal health is being blocked by toxins, and Inflamm-A-Man wants to stay in there, but we want to get him out. With that, that concludes our Lunch and Learn today. I'm Denise Krebs, hashtag DNA Detective and your agent of health. With the code of you, you have 3 choices now. Number 1, you can say that was nice and go on about the way you're living and do nothing and hope for the best. Number 2 is you can go to agentofhealth.solutions and download the free 5-day Healthy Habit Challenge. Get started in looking at shifting your habits. Or number 3, you can schedule a discovery call. It's about 20 minutes with me, and let's just see what's going on. You can do 2 and 3 if you would like. Would love to do that. So I'm here because I love supporting women struggling with mystery health challenges, and I want to see you live your purpose. With that, I believe, yes, that is the last slide. Thanks again for sharing your lunch with me today, and happy Wellness Wednesday. Be blessed, be healthy, and be amazing.